All right, so welcome to Statistical Analysis in Psychology. Glad to see so many people here. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be basically giving you an intro to the course so that you know what to expect, what's going to go on this semester, and make sure that we're all on the same page so you'll know what to expect. So in terms of what we'll do, we're going to start off with a brief introduction. So some of you I recognize, you've been in my classes before. Others I'm seeing for the first time. So I'll introduce who I am, talk about some of the research projects that I do, and also the Stigma-Free initiative that I'm a part of. After that, we're going to go through the course overview, course procedure, and then we'll end it by hitting some syllabus highlights. So basically you know how to navigate the syllabus and what to expect in this course. All right, so let's start off with one of the hardest parts of the course. How do you pronounce my last name? So I am Dr. Igor Yurichevich. So like we're going to do for most of the concepts in this course, we're going to break this down into simple units that you already know how to do. So stats might look complicated if you flip to that final chapter, but we are going to build it up piece by piece, just the same way I'm going to build up my name piece by piece. So my name, Yurichevich, starts out with a U. Then there's a reach, then you open up and say ah, and then finally there's a veach. And if any of you are maybe mathematics minors, you'll notice that that gray triangle is a veach. So it's you, reach, veach. Let's try that on 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, that wasn't good at all, so let's try it again. 1, 2, 3. All right, better. So this is going to be a very important slide for this course for two reasons. Number one, statistics is not an intuitive way of thinking. So statistics was developed because when humans look at data, when humans look at results, our minds have biases built in that fool us into thinking something is there when it's not, or misses when something actually is there. So these techniques are not how your mind works. So it's going to be potentially a little bit confusing at first. So if you at all feel that something isn't making sense during the lecture, feel free to put up your hand and be like, Dr. Yurichevich, what did you just say about central tendency? Or Dr. Yurichevich, can you go over the null hypothesis one more time? Feel free to do that. We're going to have a lot of time built into this course. Because the other reason you might need this slide a lot in this particular course is that a lot of the class meeting time is going to be devoted to practice time. So we're going to learn about something, and then you are going to use the computers that you're sitting in front of, and you're actually going to do it. You're actually going to practice it in class. And if things go off the rails during that practice time, that's a perfect opportunity to be, Dr. Yurichevich, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Dr. Yurichevich, I've tried this 3 times. It's still not working out. And I'll come by and make sure that you're on the right path. All right, so remember that slide. Dr. Yurichevich, use it as often as you need to make sure that you're successful in this course. All right, next, research projects. So I use statistics in my research. It's one of the necessary aspects so that I can figure out whether or not an effect is there. What does the data that I collect mean? And one of the projects that I use statistics for is in my work in visual language. So visual language, much like we have a spoken language, we also have a visual language. We have a language of pictures and images and icons and emojis that we understand. And part of my research is trying to look at how do we understand those images? How do we develop and use our visual language? And one of the areas that I do my research in that uses a lot of visual language to communicate is comic books. So much of my research is done by analyzing comic books for patterns, for devices, and then making inferences in terms of how our mind works based on those patterns of devices. So for example, just to give you an indication of what visual language might incorporate, here we're going to have 2 examples of 2 different covers, one from Daredevil, one from the Falcon. But you can see similarities between the 2. This is part of their visual grammar. So just the same way that sentences have the same structure because of grammar, Images oftentimes have the same structure because of visual grammar. So for example, in both of these cases, the antagonist, the bad guy, the villain, is shown in gigantic size. The image of that character is very large. This is part of our understanding of visual language and indicates that this particular individual is dangerous, they're powerful, they're ever-present. Basically, they're going to be a problem for the hero. Notice also that in both of these cases, the hero is not centered in this composition. The hero, in both cases, is off to the side. And asymmetry, and the use of asymmetry, is one other aspect of visual language. And because most of nature is symmetrical, right? Most of us have bilateral symmetry. Asymmetry oftentimes signals things that are unlike us, things that are different from the normal, such as somebody who has radar vision, even though they're blind, and another individual that has mechanical wings that allow him to fly around. This asymmetrical composition lets us know that these individuals are different. It gives us that understanding that there's something weird about them. So that's what a lot of my work entails, taking a look at those patterns, decoding visual grammar, and seeing what it tells us about how our minds actually work. So what are some of the things that we found? Well, I did studies on how is literal information in a picture combined with metaphorical information in a picture. So here we have this great picture of the Flash running super fast. And in this picture, there's literal devices that tell your mind the Flash is running. So for example, when you run, your arms actually go and legs actually go into a certain position. And that position is depicted in this picture. That's a literal device. When you run, your body is leaned forward. His body is leaned forward in this picture. That's a literal device. But there's also metaphorical devices, things that don't happen when you run. So these action lines over here, it doesn't matter how fast you run. You're not going to start having lines coming out the back of you. So that's a metaphorical device. So how does our mind combine literal information and metaphorical information to produce an understanding of this picture? Well, after analyzing a sample of these images, what we found was that your mind is able to process as much literal information as the artist wants to throw at you. But it only processes one piece of metaphorical information. And every other metaphorical device after that, your mind completely ignores. So this lets us know that your mind actually processes literal information using different mechanisms and devices than it does for metaphorical information. And this work was published in the Comics Grid. It was also published in follow-up study was published in the Journal of Comics and Graphic Novels and Comics. So you can check those out if you're interested in some of that work. Other projects that I've done that I've needed stats to analyze was a project on how do you know when something is a metaphor. So here we have a visual representation of Mockingbird, and the artist is using gigantic size. So Mockingbird is a normally sized human being, but the artist is using gigantic size here metaphorically to indicate that she's important, that she's powerful, that she's capable, that she's central to the story. So that's a metaphorical use of giant size. Here we have a literal use of giant size. Galactus in the Marvel Universe is literally a giant humanoid who comes to worlds and basically devours all of their life energy. But he is literally stories tall. He's a gigantic figure. So how does your mind understand that this one should be understood metaphorically, whereas this image, gigantic size, should be understood literally because it's the same device? So what we did is we took a look at contextual information. What do you know about these characters? What do you know about the comic book genre? What do you know about comic book art? And we combined that with structural information, information in the actual picture, such as an incomplete figure versus a complete figure that's occluded and interacting with the environment. And what we found was that certain combinations of those information is readily processed by our mind. One combination is not. And if you want to know which combination is not, you can check out our publication on the International Journal of Comic Art, where again we found another insight into how your mind works by taking a look at these images. And the final one that I wanted to mention, this was one of the more recent ones. We did a study on where do these metaphors come from? How do they spread through a visual language? So when you see a picture like this, most of us understand that that means that this person just had a bright idea, that they just came up with this idea. You get that ding, you know, the light bulb above the head. We know what that means. But how did that become a part of our visual language? How did it spread through our visual language? Where did it start, and why did it kind of get picked up and incorporated into how we visually communicate? Well, I didn't do the study on the light bulb metaphor. What I did it on was a metaphor called Closeup Eye Asymmetry. And Closeup Eye Asymmetry is where you combine the device of close-up, so picture of a person, mostly shoulders and head, and then you also have asymmetry, but specifically around the eye. So here we have Storm, who has lightning powers coming out of one eye. She's got her hair coming down and covering her other eye. There is nothing asymmetrical about Storm's powers. Lightning should be coming out of both eyes, but the artist said, no, I want to make her asymmetry. I want to use close-up composition, hence close-up eye asymmetry. Here we have the same thing for Magneto, the same thing for Peter in the Harbinger series, and nothing about these characters is asymmetrical. And yet the artist decided that they were going to incorporate close-up asymmetry as a pictorial device. You can do it with the depiction of powers, you can do it with shading, you can do it with composition, so you can place a camera asymmetrically in front of somebody's face. And you might say to yourself, well, that's the only way that you can hold a camera if you want to take that aspect ratio of a picture. Well, you can hold a skull wherever you want. So the artist here chose, again, to cause asymmetry around the eye. And then you can also do it in other types of compositions. And what my research revealed was that this close-up eye asymmetry, which is also used outside of the comic book world, can actually be traced back to an image outside of comics, outside of art. It's from David Bowie, and specifically it was his image for the cover of Aladdin Sane, which has close-up eye asymmetry. And what we found was that we combined developmental psychology, so how does artistic ability develop? Turns out that there is a very, there's a period in a child's life where they're very susceptible to outside influences in their artistic development. And it happened around 9 to 13 years of age. And what we found was that artists who were 9 to 13 years of age when Aladdin Sane came out and then reached their peak productive output, and that usually occurs in your 30s, they were the ones that used close-up eye asymmetry the most. And that happened in the 90s, so they were 9 to 13 in 1973, I think it was. 20 years later, it was the 90s, and that was when close-up eye asymmetry just exploded in terms of our visual language. So we were able to determine, not the first time that close-up eye asymmetry was ever used. So again, if you've ever, anybody who's ever drawn a painting of a pirate, would have used close-up eye asymmetry for the eye patch. But this was the moment, this was the image, this was the event that caused it to become part of our visual language. And if you want to read more about that, this was also published in the Comics Grid Journal of Comic Scholarship, and this is available online. All right, last little thing about my research. If you want to check out some more of my research, I am on Twitter and Instagram, and I regularly post about some of the stuff that I'm doing, some of the stuff that my lab is doing. And you can also check out the hashtag Comic Book Scientist for some of the work that I do, and Too Hard for Soft Science for some of the work that my students are doing. And if you just want to take a look at some of the possibilities for what research can be in psychology, feel free to check those out. All right, one last little thing about me.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
So the David Bowie thing is so interesting. Do you feel like that, even though it's sort of this developmental thing that you're talking about with the artists, do you think that it still holds some sort of artistic significance for them when they do the eye asymmetry? It's sort of like you were talking about the earlier magazines with the...
Yes. Yeah. So that's a good question. So they were asking, the question was about the significance of the close-up eye asymmetry. And what they have found, people that study visual grammar, is they found that close-up means that the person is accessible. So if you draw somebody in a close-up, what that means is that that person, let me just get this back up here. So if you draw somebody as a close-up, that means that they're accessible. That means that they're like you, right? So things drawn in close-up, just intuitively, we kind of understand it as, oh, this person is close to me, this person is like me. Things that are drawn asymmetrical, and especially around the eyes, because the eyes are very important for social communication. Things that are drawn asymmetrical give you the opposite message. So they tell you that this person is unlike you, that this person is alien, there's something else. So this one device can cause that contradiction in our understanding where you look at it and you kind of get pulled towards the person and say, oh, they're like me. But at the same time, you get pushed away and you're like, ooh, they're a little bit different. So that's why these two are combined to kind of create that tension. Yeah, good question. All right. Yeah, so if you want to follow, check it out. At Paladin Insane and Comic Book Scientist, Too Hard for Soft Science. All right, last thing, the Stigma Free Initiative. So the National Alliance on Mental Illness, they have this initiative where they're trying to make mental illness stigma free. They're trying to get more people to basically come out in the open and lift the veil that has been placed on having a mental illness or mental disorder, lift the stigma that is causing people to not admit that they have a mental illness and then not get help for their mental illness. So as part of this initiative, I take the first class in each of my classes just to let people know that I have a mental illness. I suffer from depression. And again, just to kind of let you know, this is nothing to be ashamed of. It's nothing to hide from. It's just something that is. So we need to try to dispel the stigma. And one of the only ways to do that is to openly talk about it. So this last little part of the Stigma Free, I just want to kind of give you a timeline and to show you that for anybody that might be going through a mental illness, there is light at the end of the tunnel. So this is a timeline of my time here at IUSB, starting with the fall of 2010 when I first came here to IUSB. And I was diagnosed with depression in spring 2012. And I wish I could tell you that my depression started maybe like a month before I was diagnosed. You know, much like you might wait a little bit of time when you have a cold before you go to the doctor. However, it was years that I was living with depression. And that's one of the big reasons why this initiative is so important, because people will live with this for years and it'll take years away from their lives just because of this stigma that is in our society surrounding it. They don't want to admit it to themselves and go get help. So I was undiagnosed for a while. I started my therapy. I had both prescriptions and cognitive behavioral therapy. I filled my last prescription on spring 2013. And again, I wish I could tell you that at that time I was recovered and I was back to 100%. Not true. The recovery was ongoing and it's still ongoing. It's still a process. But things do get massively better. So just to kind of illustrate this, one of the ways that they measure productivity when you're a psychologist is how much do you publish? How many peer-reviewed articles do you publish? How many non-peer-reviewed articles do you publish? Basically, how much research are you getting out there into the public? So when I was in the midst of my depression, I managed to publish one article, and that is not a lot. And just to show you how little that is, I published one in the fall of 2012. After a little bit of recovery, I was able to publish, jumping the gun, 2 in the spring of 2016. I got another publication in the fall of 2016. I got 5 more next year in the spring of 2016. And I need to update this because I had another publication plus a symposium in 2018. We got another one submitted for 2019. Basically, just want to let you know that if you are going through this, or if you know somebody who is, there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is help. But the big thing is you can't do this alone. You need to get professional help. So I don't know how many times I thought to myself, like I was my own worst enemy. I don't know how many times I thought to myself, I'm just going to man up. I'm just going to overcome this. This is just a phase. I'm going to push through. I'm going to tell myself not to be so depressed. It's garbage. It doesn't work. It's not possible. Go get help. Or if you know somebody, encourage them to go get help. Because I'll tell you, this visit to the doctor was not my idea. This was my wife's idea. So again, if you know somebody, encourage them to go get help. And if you have any questions about anything, or if you think that you might be suffering from a mental illness and you don't know where to go, come see me. We'll talk about it. We'll see what we can be done. If you don't know what that first step is, I'll let you know. I'll be your first step. But definitely, try to do something about it. All right, so that's the end of the PSA. Back to the course. So what are we going to do this semester? We're basically going to learn how to do statistics, and we're going to learn specifically how to do statistics that applies to psychology. So statistics, if this was a general course on statistics, your textbook would probably be about that thick. If you take out all of the things that you won't use in the behavioral sciences, the textbook shrinks to about that large. If you take out everything that you don't use outside of psychology, the textbook shrinks again. So we're going to take a look at the statistics that you're going to be using like 95% of the time in psychology. So either when you're doing psychology experiments or when you're reading about psychological research, this course is going to be about the statistics that you're going to encounter the most. So the things that we will cover: measures of central tendency, elementary probability, statistical inference, hypothesis testing, analysis of variance. Those words might not mean anything to you today. They will by the end of the semester. And the other thing that we'll do is we will learn how to do stats using statistical programs and packages. So we're going to be using Excel and SPSS. And I'm going to assume that you know very little about either of those. And we'll just build it up and get you to the point where you can do the statistics, make your decisions, analyze the data using Excel and SPSS. All right, so some of the objectives: learn how to use Excel. Just to dissuade anybody who might be thinking differently, you cannot do this course without using Excel or SPSS. So just in case you might be thinking, well, I'm pretty fast with pencil and paper, I can get it done. You won't. You can't. Part of the objectives of this course is to learn how to use Excel and SPSS. So that's one of the objectives. You'll be using MyStatLab to complete your pre-test, post-test, and homework. You'll learn how to interpret frequency distributions. It's one of the first things we'll learn. Measures of central tendency, z-scores. You'll find out what those are. How to do a hypothesis test, which is the big thing that the course is going to be building to. So this course is going to build very gradually. Our end goal is going to be that hypothesis test. That's what we're going to be building to, and we're going to be doing that using SPSS. So again, I'm going to assume that nobody here might have even heard about SPSS before, let alone know how to use it. It's going to come in the back half of the course, and again, we're going to build that up piece by piece. So why are we doing all this? What's the reason that we need statistics? Well, the reason is because our human brains are horrible at interpreting data. Our human brains are horrible at taking a look at the results of a study, the results of a treatment, and determining whether or not the treatment was effective. So that's one of the big reasons why we use stats in psychology. So if you were working with clients who suffered from depression, and you had two different treatments, treatment A and treatment B, and you split them up, you did an experiment, you split them up into two groups. One group gets treatment A, one group gets treatment B, and after the treatment, you measure their scores on the Beck suppressant inventory, and you see that treatment A leads to an average score of 42.6, and treatment B leads to an average score of 25.7. That is the results of your study. You've known since elementary school that 25.7 is lower than 42.6. So our human minds will take a look at this and they'll say, you know what, treatment B must be the better treatment because it has the lower Beck's depression inventory score. Now it indicates lower depression. It has to be the better treatment. But what we don't know and what's hidden and where our minds fail is that there's two reasons why treatment B might be lower than treatment A. So those two reasons are either that this is a real difference. Treatment B is actually better than treatment A. Treatment B is actually a better way to treat depression. That's one possibility for the results that we got. The other possibility is that it was a fluke result. It was just by chance. So that's the second possibility. And as psychologists, because of the importance of the topics that we deal with, because of the importance of treating these mental illnesses, and because of the importance of, intervening in the way that somebody's minds work, we absolutely need to know, is this a real difference or if this is a fluke result? Because if it's a fluke result and we start giving people treatment B and it's no better than treatment A, we're putting people's lives at risk, right? We're putting people in danger. If, on the other hand, it actually is a real difference and we miss that, we don't understand that, we don't detect that, then we miss the chance to help millions of people suffering from depression. So if it's a fluke result, we need techniques to determine whether it is a fluke result. And if it's a real difference, we need techniques to detect whether it is a real difference. And those techniques to make that decision is what we're going to be developing this semester. So as we work through this semester, keep that in mind. That's what we're doing. That's why we're doing what we're doing, is to always find a way to determine when you see a difference, because it's going to be visually apparent, right? 25 is less than 42. But when we see a difference, is it a real difference or is it a fluke result? And as psychologists, it's really important for us to be able to make that decision. All right. Right now, we're going to continue on with our course overview. And I'm going to give you probably the briefest history of stats you're ever going to come across. And we'll start off with Francis Galton. So Francis Galton, he is known as the father of statistics. He came up with, amongst other things, the average. So the add up everything, divide by how many you have, that's your average. He's the one that came up with that amongst, basically a ton of other things that we use in statistics. William Gossett. William Gossett came up with the t-test. That's one of the first tests that we're going to use for determining between fluke results or real, real difference. And William Gossett actually stayed anonymous. So he published under, I think the pseudonym was Student. So he didn't want his name out there. I don't know why. But anyways, William Gossett made the t-test. We're going to use that. That's going to be one of the first hypothesis tests that we take a look at. Ronald Fisher came up with the F statistic, F for Fisher. We're going to encounter him when we use ANOVAs, one of the most powerful ways of analyzing real differences or fluke results. And then the last guy that we're going to encounter is John Wilder Tukey. I just love that name. And he came up with the Tukey test. So you can see that not a lot of these guys had creativity when they were naming their tests. But he came up with the Tukey test. That's also going to be important when we get to ANOVAs. All right, so that's your statistics history lesson. Let's take a look at a little bit of mathematics. Euclid. So Euclid was a mathematician, basically came up with Euclidean geometry. That's the sort of intuitive geometry that we all understand. So the 3 dimensions, coordinate planes, all that kind of stuff, that was Euclid. Pythagoras came up with, amongst other things, the Pythagorean theorem. So for a right angle triangle, the sum of the squares of 2 sides equals the sum of the square of the hypotenuse. Isaac Newton was another important person in math. He came up with, for mathematics, calculus. He invented calculus, which allows you to do a lot of very interesting things, especially when differences come down to infinitesimally small. And then the last one, a recent one, is Kurt Gödel. And Gödel came up with the incompleteness theorem, which was a rather new idea about how systems, the more complicated a system is, the less it can be complete. And if you're interested in that and its implications on our psychology, there is a very accessible book called Gödel, Escher, and Bach, The Eternal Golden Braid. And this is a book, Gödel is part of that, Gödel, Escher, and Bach, that basically takes a look at this idea of incompleteness, the idea recursive loops and what it might say about, our minds, especially consciousness. And to give you an indication of how influential this book is, if you've ever followed a mathematician on social media, this is what a lot of their selfies look like, just because of the influence of this book. So it's massively accessible. It's written in a very welcoming way. It's very non-technical. And I would recommend anybody who's interested, especially in consciousness, to take a look at that. All right, so that's the history lesson. So why? Why would I do this history lesson? You're not going to be tested on this history lesson. Why I do it is because I want to make a very, very clear point here. So those are the 4 statisticians. These are the 4 men that made huge contributions to statistics. There are 4 mathematicians. Those are the individuals that made huge contributions to mathematics. And you will notice that there is nobody in both sides of that image. I mention this because a lot of students come here with the idea that statistics is math. Statistics is not math. It's not math at all. We're going to use math, but it is not mathematics. So if you have had difficulty with mathematics before, if you have struggled with mathematics before, if you have bought into the myth that you are not a math person, and I hate that myth because it's just not true, but if you've bought into that before and you thought coming in here that you were at a disadvantage, that you weren't going to be able to do well in this course because it's, statistics is math, hopefully this will be the beginning of your understanding that statistics is not math. So the math, we are going to use math, but the math we're going to use is going to be the math that you learned in high school. And you are going to learn exactly 2 new pieces of math, and we're going to learn them next class, and then that is it. So again, if you came in here thinking that, things were going to be impossible because you're not a math person, just know stats is not math. Stats is a way of applying what you already know to analyze data in new ways. So you are going to learn things, but you're going to learn statistics. And you're not going to be burdened with learning any additional mathematics. So keep that in mind. These are mathematicians. Those are statisticians. No crossover. You're going to learn 2 new pieces of math. So if you came in here a little bit worried about the math aspects of this, don't be. And I've known this from experience. I've had students in this class who were math wizards and ended up with an A+. I've had students in this class who told me before that they struggled in math, they were never able to do well, they scraped in with a C- in M111, and they ended up with A+ in this course. Stats is not math. Stats is a new way of thinking and a new way of applying the math that you already know. So that's what we're going to do. In this course, we're going to change the way that you think. You are now going to go through the process of learning how to think like a statistician. So we're going to get you to the point where you're learning, where you're thinking like Ronald Fisher. And statistical thinking, it needs to be practiced. So more than any other course that I teach, stats is the one that you need to practice. You need to do it. You need to get your hands dirty. I've had other courses where students simply read material and they understand it and they learn it and it comes out on the exam. Stats is not like that. So when you read it and you understand it, it still needs to be done. It needs to be practiced. So the good news is that I'm going to assume that everybody is starting at the beginning. I'm going to assume that you're walking in here with no statistical abilities whatsoever. So that's good news, because the other piece of good news is that everyone can do this. I have taken many students through this process, through this training system that I have developed in this course, who thought they were going to, let's face it, suck at statistics, and we're just going to take this course as a necessary evil in order to get their degree, and by the end of it, understood statistics, and we're rocking A+ on every single exam. So just bear that in mind. Everybody can do this, but you absolutely need to practice. So on that note, what we're going to be doing is almost every single class that we come, I'm going to try to, as much as I can, split it up into approximately half of the class is going to be the lecture portion. and the other half is going to be practice. So this is my last little math is not stats inside joke. So if you're a mathematician, you'll know that that equals 1. You'll know that that equals 2. That you solve it equals 3. That you solve it equals 6. If you cannot solve this clock, you'll still do well in this course. Half of the meeting times are going to be devoted to lectures. The other half of the meeting times, as much as possible, are going to be devoted to practice. So I'm going to take you through some guided examples. I'm going to take you through the concepts that we need to learn in the first portion of the class. And then as much as we can in the back half of the class, I'm just going to say, here's some practice Excel sheets. Here's some practice in my lab. Start on the homework. Start doing this. Try this. And that's the time where you actually go in there, give it a shot. And if things go wrong, call me over and say, Dr. Uricevich, I don't understand what I'm doing here. But it's absolutely necessary. Practicing is absolutely required. So to show you what I mean by practice, I'll give you this little example here. So this is a rather crude example, but effective. Keep this in mind when you're working on your statistics, because you don't want to fall into this particular trap. You don't want to fall into the trap of the muted video. All right, one sec. There we go. There we are.
Honestly, you're one of my responsibilities, honestly. I'm Batman. I am Batman. Don't you tell your friends. There's a new face of justice in Gotham. Who are you? I'm Bruce Wayne.
Alright, so crude example, but effective nonetheless. Alright, so I want you to think about this when you're practicing. Think of the phrase, don't practice until you get it right, practice until you cannot get it wrong. So when you are doing your in-class practice, for example, and you're struggling with z-scores, and you don't know how to do it, and then finally you figure it out, and you get that z-score right for the first time. That doesn't mean that you can do it. That just means that you're on your way. So you don't want to practice it until you, oh, finally I got it right. You want to practice it until you cannot get it wrong. You want to practice it until you sit down in front of the computer and you are just sort of automatically calculating that z-score. And we're going to give you the opportunity to do this in this course because we're going to go over the concepts that you need to do, usually with a guided problem where you follow along in class, then you will have practice time in class to work on your own and call me over if you need help. You'll have pre-tests, you'll have post-tests, you'll have homework. So you're going to have at least 5 looks at this information, 5 opportunities to practice it before we even get to the exam. So make sure that you're keeping up, taking advantage of all of those opportunities. Make sure that when I hand out the Excel practice sheets, that you complete them, that you give them a go, because again, you don't want to be at the exam sitting down and the whole time you're walking up to the exam, you're like, oh, I'm Batman, I'm Batman, I'm Batman. And then as soon as you sit down to the exam, you're like, oh no, I'm Bruce Wayne, and everything is gone. You want it to get to the point where it's nice and automatic, and this course is structured to give you that practice opportunity to get to that automatic point. So just a little bit more insight into the way that this course is designed. So this is going to be a little infographic here. So this is where you're beginning today. This is you right now. So this pillar here represents the knowledge that you're bringing into this course. And this plank represents the skills that you're bringing into this course. So that's where you're starting. This represents where you're going to end up by the end of the semester. And as you can see right now, there's no way for you to get from here up to here. So if you flip to chapter 10 and start reading chapter 10, I don't recommend this, but if you flip to chapter 10 and start reading chapter 10, none of it's going to make sense to you, because this is where you're going to be, this is where you are right now. So what this course is going to do is it's going to take you from there, your starting point, get you to that ending point, and it's going to do it by gradually increasing your pillar of knowledge. So it's going to gradually increase what you know. So as we go through this course, you're going to learn more and more about statistical techniques. And for the first few things that you learn, the skills that you brought with you, that plank, they're going to be enough to get you to that next pillar of knowledge. So the first thing that we do when we're learning measures of central tendency, we're going to learn how to calculate the average. You probably already know how to calculate an average. At the very least, you know how to add things and then divide things. So you have the skills that you need to get to that first new pillar of knowledge. However, from that point on, you're not going to have the skills that you need to get to that next pillar. And what we're going to be doing is, this is where the practice comes in. So when you practice, when you do these questions, when you follow along in class, when you try it on your own during the practice sessions, pre-test, post-test, homework, that's all going to increase your skills so that you can then make it to the next pillar. And again, this process will be repeated and repeated and repeated until we finally get to that end of the semester and you're sitting there in May super happy because you just aced your final exam, and the statistics course that you thought was going to be a horrible experience just ended up being a wonderful outcome. And maybe you want to be a statistician now. I don't know. You can change your own career path if you like. But at the very least, you'll have success in this course. What you don't want to do is not practice and not engage with the material. Because if you try to get to this next pillar without developing the skills that you need to, this is what's going to happen. You're going to fall off your pillar of knowledge. This is what happens to students if they haven't put in the practice, and typically the feeling is being completely lost in the class. So if this happens to you, if you're sitting in a class one day and you say to yourself, I have no idea what is going on anymore in this course, and you go through that day's lecture and you go through that day's practice, and at the end of it you're like, I have no idea what is going on in this course, what's happened is this: you've fallen down somewhere. If this ever happens, come see me in an office hour. I can get you out of there. I've done it before with other students. You know, occasionally everybody falls in there. I'll get you out. I will get you back on that pillar of knowledge. But when this happens, do it as quick as you can, because everything in this course builds upon everything else, and your opportunity to catch up and get back on that pillar gets smaller and smaller the longer you wait. So when you, again, come to a class and we go through the material, you go through the practice, if at the end of that class you're still thinking to yourself, I have no idea what is going on anymore, that's a good time to stop by my office hour and just tell me I have no idea what's going on anymore, and we'll fix it. So again, the procedure that we use in this class, the program that I've set up, can work for everybody. But if you find yourself in this position here, please come see me. We will get you back on track, because unlike other courses, everything in this course builds upon what you've learned before. So in others of my courses, for example, my learning course, if you do poorly in classical conditioning, when we get to our operational conditioning section, you can understand that section, right? You have sort of a brand new start. It's a brand new topic. In stats, everything builds upon what came before. So you need to know how to calculate a mean and how to calculate variance before you can do z-scores. You need to know z-scores before you can do probability. You need to know probability before you can do a t-test. You need to know t-test before you can do ANOVA. There is not one part of this course where you can say, I'll just skip that part. I don't really need to know it. You do. Every part of this course builds on everything else. So again, if you ever do find yourself lost, come see me. We'll get you back on track and get you back up on the pillars, get you back on practice, and get you to that final destination. All right, a few more things just in terms of the course procedure. For those of you who hadn't met before, you know this is my typical policy. I like to run all my courses like a research lab meeting. That means all concepts are open to ideas and discussion. So if you ever have a question, if you ever need clarification, if you ever want to see it again, just raise your hand, let me know. Dr. Yudicevich, I'm not quite understanding what you mean when you say that the mean is the balance point of the scores. Dr. Yudicevich, z-scores, my z-scores are not working. Why is that? Just raise your hand, let me know. My philosophy is that there's no bad questions or bad ideas. You probably all heard the phrase, there's no bad question except the one that is unasked. But you will have wrong ideas. So you can't ask a wrong question, but you can have a wrong idea. And again, this is something that's going to happen in stats because stats is a new way of thinking. Human beings, again, are horrible at interpreting data without some sort of outside objective strategies. That is what stats are. So if you think you know how to analyze data, if you have ideas that are intuitive, chances are those ideas are going to be wrong. So again, raise your hand. We'll get you fixed up. That's just the way the science progress occurs. And we'll make sure that, again, you get to that final pillar, you get to that top, and you're successful in this course. All right, some administrative stuff. In terms of contact, there's my office hours. So right after this class, almost right after this class at 1:15 is when my office hour is. I got another one at 4 p.m. Again, if you're lost, if the class that you just attended made no sense to you, come on by, no appointment required, just drop in. There's my phone number. Please don't use it because I still got the little blinking red light from messages that are on that phone. But if you do want to get in contact with me, use Canvas messages. It helps keep my email from students organized. I will try to have a 24-hour turnaround on any Canvas messages that I receive. And also, you'll have access to lecture slides, course information, announcements, and all that will be through Canvas. In terms of the required text and resources, we use the eText initiative here. So this is, and we use MyLab. MyLab is one of the best learning tools that I've found for statistics. So you have access to this right now. So once you're registered in this course, you can go to Canvas. That's how you access it. You access it through the modules. And when you click on that, it will take you into a new window. You'll have to open up a new window for statistical analysis in psychology. And one of your first assignments, I will populate the assignments. We had a little bit of an issue getting my old assignments loaded, but I will populate the assignments real soon. One of your first assignments is just going to be learning how to use MyLab. So again, it'll start off simple, but this is where we're going to be doing most of your learning tools. So this is where you're going to find your pretest. This is where you're going to find your post-test. This is where you're going to find most of your homework assignments. This is where you're going to have access to your e-text, where you find your readings. So take a look at it. Make sure, I would say today, just if you haven't already, click on that module in Canvas, take a look inside, start poking around. But most importantly, make sure that it loads on your computer that you're going to use. So one of the unfortunate things about my lab is that it does sometimes get a little finicky. So I've heard students who couldn't open it up on Bing and had to open it up in Mozilla. I've heard of students who struggled with Mozilla and had to open it up in Chrome. Whatever it is, find out how to get it open on your computer, how to get access to it. You might need to enable pop-ups. You might need to download, the latest Flash program. Whatever it is, just make sure that it's up and working, because we will be using this for just about all of the homework assignments and pre-tests that you're going to encounter in this course. Other resources that you should be aware of. In terms of resources at IUSB, so when you're here, when you're on campus, you have access to Excel and you have access to SPSS, and both of those are free. So, for example, on your computers right now, you got Excel and you got SPSS. In the Psych Lab, you got Excel and you got SPSS. So when you're here and you're working on your statistics homework, you'll have access to both of those for free. When you're at home, you can have access to Excel for free. So if you have a computer and you don't have Microsoft Office on it, you can get Microsoft Office through the IUware program that we have here. So as a student, you can download and install Microsoft Office on your computer so you have Excel at home. You can also get access to SPSS for free, but this one's a little bit different. You cannot, I just want to make sure everybody knows about this, we will use SPSS. You will have to use SPSS, so it's a required resource, and you can get it for free, but you cannot install it on your home computer for free. So don't try to install it on your home computer. If you do anything with SPSS and it asks you for a subscription fee, you've done it incorrectly. So you do not need to pay extra for SPSS. There's no subscription fee. That occurs if you try to install it on your home computer. Instead, what you're going to do is you're going to use the IU Anywhere initiative that they have here. This is a cloud computing solution, and SPSS is installed on our servers here at IUSB, and it's free for you to use, but you use it through the IU Anywhere portal. So it's not going to be installed on your computer, but basically as long as you have an internet connection, you can communicate with our computers here, run SPSS on your computer at home. So it'll look just like you have it installed, but it'll be installed on their servers here. So you can get that again in one IU if you just look up IU Anywhere. There is a small little program, Citrix Receiver, that you need to install on your computer to make sure that it can communicate with our servers here. But I just want to make sure that everybody does not think that they need to pay any more. Both of these resources you get for free. And I'll remind you again, once we need SPSS, we're only going to be using SPSS in the back half of this semester. All right, performance evaluations. So just so you know where your grades are going to come from, we're going to be using pre-tests in this class. So if you'd like to earn 16% towards your final grade, you're invited to complete 8 pre-tests. Pre-tests are designed to get you familiar with the material. There has been a ton of research that has shown that students who do pre-tests, even if they struggle with the pre-test, even if they get things incorrect, will have better learning outcomes when it comes time for the exam. So you might think that you're not making any progress. You might think to yourself, oh, I keep failing my pre-tests. They are important. Keep doing them because, again, studies have shown that even just that struggle of familiarizing yourself with the material will pay off massively when you come to the exam. So do your pre-tests. That's your first stage of practice. And just so you know, pre-tests cannot be completed after the due dates. And again, I will set all this up in my lab. Study plan mastery points. This is your safety net for your pre-test. So I understand that sometimes we're going to come across complicated material. And I understand that you cannot learn statistics on your own. There's a reason why you're coming to IUSB, is because statistics is very difficult to learn, if not impossible, working on your own. So why would I set you up for sabotage and say, hey, why don't you learn this on your own for your grade? Well, the reason I would do that is because I'm not setting you up for sabotage. Your safety net is study plan mastery points. So in my lab, there is a study plan that measures what you have mastered, and it gives you quizzes to see whether or not you have mastered particular topics. So topics for each chapter, can you achieve those mastery points? So if you complete those quizzes in the study plan, you'll earn mastery points. And your grade on your pretest will be the maximum of what you get on your pretest and your mastery points. So if you get 100% on your pretest, you get 100% on your pretest. If you've really struggled with that chapter and you get 30% on your pretest, but then you go do the mastery points, and the mastery points you have until the exam. So you can do this after we've gone over the material in class. This is just to measure, do you understand the concept? These you have until the exam to complete. And if you get 30% on your pretest, but you get 100% on the mastery points for that chapter, your pretest score changes to 100%. So again, this is just, don't get discouraged with the pretest. It's part of the process. It's part of the system that I've developed. So don't get frustrated, and don't worry that it's destroying your grade, because it won't destroy your grade, because you do have this safety net of the mastery points, which allows you to get 100% towards your grade for any pretest that you do. The quizzes can be completed after the due dates. Due dates are going to be the exams, but I will download the mastery points that you earned at that time. So just be aware of that if you want to maximize your grade in your pretests. All right, post-tests. Much like the pre-test, there's going to be post-tests at the end of every section. These, again, are due by the due dates listed. And again, you have to complete your assignments by the due dates. Most of these assignments, they're automatically administered by the MyLab system. They're graded at the time that their due date occurs, which means that they cannot be completed after that due date. All right, exams. If you would like to earn 40% towards your final grade, you're invited to complete 3 exams plus 1 final exam. The exams are going to be non-cumulative, which is a little not true in statistics. So the exams are going to be non-cumulative. So they're only going to cover specifically what we covered in class since the previous exam. However, stats, remember, builds upon everything that we learn. So while you will be calculating means and variances for exam number 1, and you will not be calculating means and variances for exam number 4, you can't forget what means and variances are by exam number 4. So it's not cumulative. Exam number 4 is just going to be on chapter 10 and confidence intervals, but those 2 topics are going to require understanding everything that came before. So it's not cumulative, but you do need to remember what came before. The big thing, though, also to know in this class is that the exams are open book. And what I mean by that is they are open everything except other people. So one other thing about statistics is that statistics is not about memorizing things. It's not about committing formulas to memory. Statistics is about being able to do statistics. And when I do my job, and if I come across statistics that I've done before, I will say to myself, oh, that's an ANOVA. I know how to do an ANOVA. Run, boom, ANOVA. In some of the comic book research that I've done, they are not your typical psychology type of research. And when I got my results, I didn't know how to analyze it. I knew an ANOVA was wrong. I knew a t-test was wrong, but I didn't know what I needed to do. So I went on Wikipedia. I went on Google. I watched a few YouTube videos. I figured it out. I got it done. Nobody in this university criticized me for doing that. You know what I mean? So in a job, at grad school, anywhere that you go that you need to do statistics, nobody is going to say to you, you have to do it without looking at anything else. They're just going to say to you, here's some data, analyze it, get it done. And that's all that I want in this course. I just want you to get to the point where you can do the analyses, you can do the statistics, and I don't care if it's all up here, and I don't care if it's all down here, right? Just so long as you can get it done. Much like in a job, right? That's all they care about is, can I get this done? So because of that, the exams are open book. And what I mean by open book is I mean open everything except other people. The one thing you cannot do is communicate with other people during the exam. So no Skyping with the statistical, the chair of the statistics department at MIT, right? You can't do that. It's got to be your own work. But you're going to have access to my lab. So you're going to have your e-text there. You're going to have all your Canvas notes. You're going to have all your Canvas Excel sheets. You're going to have any notes that you want to bring. You can bring a step-by-step guide if you want to write one out for yourself. You can go online. You can search Google for how to do a t-test if you need to during an exam. So it's completely open book. All I need to know is that you can get it done. And whether it's up here or whether it's down here, that doesn't matter. So take comfort in that. This is not a memorization course. The one caveat for that, though, is that if you try to learn the material during the exam, you will not finish the exam. If you just need to reference the material during the exam, that's going to be what the open book policy is all about. So if you get to the z-score, right? Let's use z-scores. If the exam says calculate a z-score, and you say to yourself, oh man, what's the formula for a z-score? Let me check out my textbook. Oh, there it is. There's the formula. That's the way that you want to use open book. You don't have to memorize that z-score formula. So long as you know what a z-score is and you know where to find it, that's what the open book is there for. You'll be successful. If, on the other hand, it says calculate a z-score, and you're sitting there going, what is a z-score? Well, let me read chapter 4. All right, yeah, you're not going to do well. You're going to run out of time and not be able to complete the exam. So use the open book for what it's meant for. It's not there for you to learn the material during the exam. It's just there so you don't have to memorize it. And again, feel free, and I'll encourage you as the exams come up, feel free to make your own kind of resources. So I've had students before, when we get to hypothesis testing, it's a 5-step procedure. They will write those 5 steps out for themselves with little notes about what they need to do at each step, and they do awesome on the exam, and that's great. You know, do it that way. I don't expect you to memorize this. I need you to be able to do it. All right, a few more things. Makeup exams. You might need to miss an exam. Circumstances that are beyond your control, I'm very flexible about. So if you're sick, I'll accept that. If your boss is telling you that you need to go to a company retreat on that day, I'll accept that. If your child has a fever and you can't take them to daycare, I'll accept that. So circumstances that are beyond your control are acceptable. But the one thing that I have to be absolutely firm on is that it needs to be documented. So if you're sick, either go to your doctor or go to the Health and Wellness Center here. I need some sort of doctor's note. I need some sort of documentation. If your boss is telling you that you need to go on a retreat, forward me the email, the company email that he sent, because I need some documentation. If your daycare has a policy that you cannot bring your child in if they had a fever in the last 24 hours, send me that, just email your daycare and tell them to send me a note. I need some sort of documentation in order for you to take the makeup. If you need to write the makeup, check the syllabus for information. Homework assignments, there's going to be 14 homework assignments. 2 of those are going to be Excel assignments. The rest of them are all going to be MyLab assignments. The homework assignments actually can be completed after the due date, but you are going to give up 20% of your grade for any uncompleted questions. So if you get it mostly done, MyLab will grade it at the due date, and then you can go back and finish that little part that you missed, and you'll only lose 20% on that little part that you missed. But basically, why do that? Just keep up to date, try to get it done on time. Excused absences. Again, if something beyond your control is keeping you away from completing your homework, so this is not for exams, but if something happens and you just weren't able to do a pretest, if something happens in your homework, you couldn't get to your homework, let me know, again, if it's beyond your control. but it needs to be documented. I know sometimes, depending upon the emergency, it's a little crass to ask for documentation, but it's just a policy that I need to have in place. All right, a few more things. Syllabus grading. Pretty standard breakdown. That's where your grades are going to come from. It's pretty standard except for one thing, which is the exams. So like most of my courses, I grade my exams on a sliding scale. So your best exam, the exam that you do the best on, that's going to be worth 16% of your final grade. Second best exam is 11%. Third best exam is 8%. And then your lowest exam is only going to be worth 5% of your grade. And this, I find, is more important in this course than in any of my other courses, because some students just get statistics from day one. Some students are going to get 100% on exam 1, and 100% on exam 2, and exam 3, and exam 4. They just get it from day one. Other students, it happens later, right? So trust in the process. If you're confused, at some point, everything's just going to come together, and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I get it now. You know, it's kind of like when Neo got his kung fu loaded up into his brain. If you don't remember that, it's a movie from the 1900s about the Matrix. Anyways, yeah, some students get it later. Every student that I've ever seen that did the homework, went through the practice, eventually got it. But when it happens for you, when that snap of insight occurs for you, might be a different time. So I have this sliding scale in place just in case it happens after the first exam. If it happens after the first exam and you don't do well on the first exam, guess what? You're only going to lose a portion of 5%. Even if you get 40% on the first exam, you've only lost 3% off of your final grade. So if it takes you a little bit longer to get going, just know that the exams are not going to wipe out your grade. And I've had students who failed their first exam, did better on their second exam, and then exam 3, 100%, exam 4, 100%. I've had students who struggled with homework, and then all of a sudden, homework assignment number 4, 100%, number 5, 100%, number 6, 100%. It's possible, and it happens. So this is built in there. Just in case it doesn't happen for you like immediately, just bear with it. You got a little bit of a cushion. Now, that being said, if exam 1 is your lowest exam, come see me in the office hour. Because even though forgiveness is built in here, we still got to make sure that you're on that path. All right, real quick, electronic devices. Clearly, you can use electronic devices during the class. The only thing that I ask is that if you need to communicate with somebody, like you get a text on your phone and you get a call, I'm all for that, but just please take it outside out of respect for your fellow students. No cell phones during the exam, though, just to make sure that we're all doing it under exam conditions. See the syllabus for accommodations for religious observances or if you have a disability. See the syllabus for information on your student responsibilities in this class, campus emergencies, and the sexual misconduct policy. The last thing that I'm just kind of rushing to is the syllabus. There's really only a couple of things I want to point out for the syllabus. So let me get that up here. All right, so you can work ahead in this course. I'm going to put together a PowerPoint just to give you a kind of heads up for some portions of this class where you can work ahead in, or what you should be, just kind of like road signs for when you work ahead. But this is the way that you read the syllabus. This new homework topics covered, this is when we're going to cover the information in class that you need to finish that homework section. So if you open up that homework section and you say, you know what, I want to give this a try, I'm going to work ahead. And then you take a look at it and you go, oh no, I have no chance at completing this yet. Just know that that is when we're going to cover it. So on January 10th, in that next class, after that class, you will have all the information that you need to finish the MyLab tutorial. Then what you're going to see is later on in the syllabus, you'll see these due dates in red. That's when it's actually due. And it's due at midnight the day before. So we meet on a Tuesday. Your homework assignment number 1 in your Chapter 1 pretest is due on the Monday at midnight. So 11:59 on a Monday, that's when your assignment is due. And then as you go through this, you'll notice that, again, I'll let you know when we're covering the topic. and then when that particular assignment is due. So again, you can work ahead. Whoops, I forgot that. That's not an online class. I'm going to update that. Please come here. That was when I had a conference last semester. All right, so again, that's the way that the entire kind of breakdown in the semester works. The last thing I want to mention is that when we have an exam, that's going to be the only thing that's going to occur during that day. So the exam days, open book, you'll come to class, that's the only thing that we're going to be doing. And then for each exam, the class before is going to be a review session. So this is going to be your opportunity to come in here and ask any final questions that you might need to in order to get yourself prepared for that exam. So before every exam class, the class before is going to be a totally student-driven review session, and I'll have more details on that as we get closer to our first exam. All right, so that is it for today. So thanks for bearing with me. We got out of here on time. And then, again, the only thing you need to do, there's nothing due for next class, but I highly, highly recommend start poking around in Canvas, go to the module, just make sure that everything is working on the computer that you are planning to do your work on in this course, because again, MyLab can be a little bit finicky, pop-ups are here, Flash might need to be installed, so let's just make sure that everything is ready to go when we need it next week. Other than that, we are done for today.